Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck, and it's Friday, July 21st, and I'm back over here where I shot the video from the other night. And after I got to looking at that, I realized there's some stuff I missed that I should have talked about. And so I ran out of light. I couldn't reshoot it that night. And after I reviewed it, I thought the video wasn't too bad, but I thought there was some stuff I missed, and the best way to handle it would be to go ahead and just make another video. I thought about not using that one and trying to re-record it, but I was afraid it would end up being so long that it would get beyond the threshold which you folks would want to watch it. So I'm back with the next phase of it and talk about some stuff that I didn't talk about before. So I'm over here with Flapjack. I'm at the same spot. It was pretty warm here today. It got up to 102, which is very unusual for us, but cloud deck came in and it's cooled down about 15 degrees now, so it's really not too bad out here. So anyway, let me talk a little bit about what I was gonna tell you about. First of all, let's go over and look under the hood a little bit. Another vehicle sitting over there. I don't know what he's doing, but on the last video I was talking to you about doing the computer and all that kind of stuff, and let me show you kind of where that's at. The main computer on this thing is this deal right here, and in order to get that out of there, you actually have to take the wire off it, and then you have to drop this fender liner down a little bit, and it slides out. So it's a little bit of a booger to get to. Now there's a secondary computer in there, which is this thing right here, and that's called the ECM, the engine control module. And that all that aluminum fin thing is to dissipate heat, because that creates quite a bit of heat. So that's the two things that make the vehicle run. Then the other big, this is the big connector that connects the engine harness to all the rest of the stuff. And so anyway, let me go back over here. I talked before about fouling plugs. And now this, if you looked at my van video last time I worked on it, and I had the doghouse cover in there, I talked about the plenum on top of the motor. And this is the same motor that the van's got. So it also has that two-piece manifold. So if you look at this thing here, that's called the plenum. There's 6 bolts that hold it to the main manifold down there. And so in order to do anything on that right bank, you got to take that thing off, and you got to take all this paraphernalia off here. So, getting to the plugs is kind of hard. It's down in there on that side. It's a little easier to get to on the driver's side. But anyway, the plug that seemed like it fouled most often was the number 4, which is the one in the back on this side. And so when I had the thing apart, I went ahead and I sent the fuel injectors down to a place, and once more down in the big city. Took them down there, and once more, just like the machine shop, it's let me come around here where I can sit down for a minute and talk to you, and then I'll tell you some other stuff. I got old Flapjack here with me. If he gets up in the camera, he might get in the shot. But anyway, 75 miles down, 75 miles back, 150 mile round trip, take him down, 150 mile round trip, pick him up. Well, it turned out it was probably a good thing I did that. Because it turned out that out of 8 fuel injectors, 3 of them are bad. Now, if you're really going to do this right, you're going to go ahead and just put new fuel injectors in there. But them little buggers are expensive. And to replace all the fuel injectors, of course, there's one for every cylinder, so there's 8 of them. And it's around between $1,000 and $1,200 to replace all the fuel injectors. Well, there's a place down in Mesa, a suburb of Phoenix, that actually will rehabilitate and check and balance and all that kind of stuff on fuel injectors, and they don't charge, obviously near as much. They're expensive, but they don't charge near as much to replacing them. So this is a 31-year-old truck, so I suspect that it probably had the original fuel injectors in it. So I didn't do that with the van. I probably should have. I wish I had, since I had it apart, but I didn't really realize that place was there at the time. And But anyway, I took the fuel injectors down there, and it turned out 3 of them were bad. And so that outfit has used ones that are certified, that he runs through his testing process. And so he optimized them, made them all equal, cleaned them, made sure they all work properly. And so when I put this truck back together, I put it back together with a good fuel injector. So I think part of the problem of my fuel following the plugs, I originally thought it was all the temperature gauge thing, and that it was acting like it was cold all the time because the computer was telling it the wrong thing. But I think also that was all that one more domino in that whole domino effect thing was that the fuel injectors were old, a couple of them didn't work right, and they were dirty. So pretty important thing, note to yourself, is that if you do take these things apart, while you're doing all that, go ahead and check that stuff. If you got the money, put new ones in, but if you're like me and don't have the money, then obviously having them checked and having them renewed or cleaned or whatever, if you will, is probably the way to go. So that was a pretty big thing I should have talked about the other night, and I don't know why, but it kind of slipped my mind, but it would have made the video a little bit longer. So now what I want to talk about is, this thing drove me nuts while I've been working on it, and something may go wrong with it tomorrow, I don't know, but it's running pretty good right now. But I did run into some problem with some bad parts. Now, I don't know if it's a COVID thing or a supply chain thing or what it is, but it just seems like there's been a whole rash of poor parts, defective parts. Sometimes I think it's our friends over in China that are trying to get even with us or something, so they're putting out product that's not very good. I don't know, who am I to say that? But anyway, it just seems like you're getting stuff and doesn't work right. Well, I ran into quite a bit of that in this project, and so let me sidebar a little bit here. And a couple of years prior, when I had the van apart, I put the van back together and I had a clicking sound in it, and I wasn't sure what that was. And I took it to a bunch of people, had them listen to it, and finally somebody said, that's a valve lifter. It's got to be a valve lifter, all it can be. And I told him, I said, well, it didn't do that before I tore it down. And it's the same valve lifters I had. I even marked them, put them back in the same spot on the same cam lobe, because you do that. And he said, I'm pretty sure that's probably what it is. And I'd pretty much run out of other ideas at that time. So I went ahead and I tore it back down, which involved taking the plenum off, taking the manifold off. So, to be able to get the valve covers and pull the push rods and all that kind of stuff. And I went ahead and I put new valve lifters in. Well, that mechanic that told me that, he said whenever you get an old high mileage engine apart like that, you always replace the valve lifters. And the reason why is because they're cheap and it may save you have to tear it down again. So that made it sound like it made a whole lot of sense. It's because I ended up tearing that thing apart 3 times before I finally got it right. And here again, if I'd have been a flat rate mechanic in a shop doing that, I'd have gone broke on that job, because they don't pay you to tear things apart 3 times. So anyway, I got the valve lifter situation figured out in the van. It run good, and it still runs pretty good. So when I tore this one apart, in the process of putting stuff on it and putting new parts on it, and about midway through the project on this, and I told you it was a COVID project, and so I wasn't in any big huge hurry, and so I kind of made the transition from trying to do it cheap to trying to do it right. And so I replaced a bunch of stuff on this when I had the motor out. And one of the things, of course, the water pump, because these Fords are a miserable thing to get to the water pump. And and that one, it wasn't leaking or anything, but it had a lot of miles on it, and I figured that it probably needed one. The timing chain was loose, so I put new timing chain on it, and just that kind of thing. But another thing I did is I went ahead and I replaced the valve lifters, thinking about that previous project. So I bought a set of them. Of course, there's 16 of them, and they were like $4 a piece or something like that. But anyway, I went ahead and got those, and I put those in it. Well, I drove the thing, and after I'd driven it about, 300 miles or something, I started getting another ticking sound. And so I was trying to figure out, it was way back in the middle of the motor somewhere, and boy, it sounded bad. It sounded initially to me like it was a main bearing or something. And, you know, and that would be catastrophic. That'd mean a new engine. And all that work I'd done on the silly thing. And so anyway, it kept getting worse as I kept driving it, and I had different people listen to it. And the only thing I could tell you about how it sounded is it was way in the middle of the motor, and it sounded expensive. And so anyway, finally, I said, you know, I can't drive it this way anymore. It's going to tear something up. So I went ahead and I pulled it apart again. I pulled that plenum off and pulled the valve covers off, and I started checking. And by golly, I had obviously there was slack here again, back on that number 4 cylinder, the back cylinder on the passenger side. And it had play in the lifter, on the rocker arm. Well, the rocker arm was tight. There was no issue there. So what did that mean? Obviously, that meant that it obviously had to be a lifter. That's all it could be. So I went ahead and had to pull the manifold back off again. And this time, by this time, of course, the engine's back in the truck. So I'm hanging over the fender, and that's kind of hard on an old guy's back. And that's why I didn't want to try to do all the job in the truck to start with. That's why I went in and pulled the motor so I could work on it standing up and have all the access in the world to it. But I wasn't going to pull the motor back out again, so this time I pulled the manifold off and got her done. Well, when I got in there and I pulled those lifters out, and they're brand new lifters, 800 miles on them by that time. That was all was on them. And let me show you what I found. Look at the difference between this one and that one. That's what, almost a 1/4 inch? And I don't know if it shows up on camera, but it's cupped real bad too. Okay, that lifter, that was a brand new lifter made by these folks, and I always thought they had pretty good stuff. It's made in Mexico, and apparently that lifter had never been heat treated. So when I pulled them all and looked at them, there's 2 or 3 other ones that started showing the same wear. This one here, you can see right there where the cam lobe had been rubbing on it, that shiny spot in the middle there. So, but this one here hadn't started breaking down yet. This one was the worst one, and you can see the cupping on there from the cam lobe. So this one, and 3 other ones were starting to show that, but not near as bad. So, damn lifters are bad. This one, apparently, for whatever reason, had never been heat treated. So I crawled around there working. I'm going to go sit down again so I can talk to you about that. But, you know, you talk about something aggravating, new parts. Anyway, sit back down again here. Get back into position. So anyway, my new valve lifters had gone bad. Well, and of course, that's right in the back of the engine where you got to crawl in there like a monkey to try to see anything. But I finally got myself into position with a light where I could look down in there where that came out of and look at the cam lobe to make sure the cam lobe wasn't damaged. Because I just knew I was going to have to end up tearing the whole thing apart and putting a new cam in it. But looking at the cam, it looked okay. And so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I was pretty frustrated by this time with new parts that didn't work, and because I'd had some other ones too, and I'm going to tell you about that while I'm here. But I ended up, I had saved all my old valve lifters, and so I went and looked at them, and heck, they looked fine. 150-some thousand miles, and they looked fine. They had no abnormal wear on them. You know, they looked better than these ones that had 800 miles on them. So I went ahead and I put all my old valve lifters back in the motor again, knowing full well that if I had a problem, I might be tearing it apart again yet. Because, you know, you don't know you got a problem until you put it all back together and start driving it. So I put everything back together with the old valve lifters, and so far, everything's been fine. But that new valve lifter is 800 miles on that valve lifter, and it cupped like that and wore that son of a gun down. I got as much of there was some metal particles in the valley, and I got as much of that stuff out as I could. And hopefully the rest of it fell down in the oil pan and will get caught by the oil filter. But there's a bit, the mechanics call it glitter. There's a bit of glitter in the valley up there, and I got as much out of it as I could. But you know, the real way to do that would have been pull the motor back out and tear it all back down and clean it. But I decided I wasn't going to do that. I was going to go ahead and do it the redneck way and the shade tree way and put it back together and hope for the best, and that's what I've done. So what else have I found? What else did I have as far as bad parts go? Well, I showed you in there, I showed you the ignition control module, a little ECM thing on the inside of the fender. Well, when I was changing all the sensors out, I got one of those, and it didn't work right, and it turned out to be defective. I got a starter. I replaced the starter. Remember I told you about the exhaust cooking the starter? Well, the starter ended up causing me an issue, so I went ahead and replaced it, and it turned over really slow. The motor turned over really slow when you're trying to start it, and it shouldn't do that. And so a friend of mine, who's a mechanic, I run it by his shop, and he checked everything that I'd done and put a draw meter on it and said that brand new starter was pulling way too much amperage trying to crank that motor over, and that the starter was defective. Well, fortunately, I got that one from Rock Auto, and Rock Auto warrantied it and gave me another one, and it's fine. But just running into the bad parts. This lifter issue, I guess, is a big thing. There's another YouTube channel called Car Wizard, and about the time I was going through this, I was watching Car Wizard's video, and turned out he had 2 customer vehicles in his shop, and both of them he'd replaced the lifters on, and both of them he had lifter problems with, very similar to what I did. One of them he caught in time to save the motor, the other one destroyed the motor. And so he ended up having to put a whole new engine in it. Well, you know, that can mean you don't make any money that month when you have to do that. So, you know, he was just ranting and raving about the poor quality of parts, and I understand that. But I ran into that same thing here. And I had that, I put that manifold, after I put the old lifters back in it, and I put the manifold on, and I put it all back together, got it running, and I'll be danged if I didn't have a coolant leak. And it was once again, way in the back of the manifold where you got to climb like a monkey to get back in there to even try to see where it's coming out of. And I couldn't see where it was coming out, but there was only one spot it could have been. And so I had to tear it all back apart again and try to figure out what I'd done wrong. I think I put just a little bit, there's water passages back there, and you put just a little bit of RTV on the manifold gasket around those water passages, and I probably put just a little bit too much. I just smeared a little bit with my finger, and I probably put a little bit too much, and it made a leak. So once I had tore it all apart, cleaned it all up, put a new set of gaskets on it, tried to be a little bit more careful about what I did that time, put it all back together, and it's still running fine. But I had that silly manifold off of there a total of 3 times, and of course it's not easy to reach back up in there, and I got to kind of sit on top of the radiator and put my feet on either side and kind of fold myself up like a Swiss Army knife to get in there. But I managed to do it. Not too bad for an old guy, I guess. But as I told you in the other video, the whole project drove me nuts. It took me a long time. And what I do is when it started aggravating me enough, I just walk away from it for a couple of days and tell myself, look, I got a brand new truck I can drive if I want to drive something. And so just use it as a hobby project, and don't let it aggravate you, and just realize it is what it is, and you get it fixed eventually. And I did, and so that's just a little more information on the old truck. And you know, I kind of, I don't know why, but I can't even tell you why, but I kind of bonded with the old thing, and I kind of like it. And I still may paint it one of these days, but I kind of like this work truck patina thing it's got. And I was thinking about putting a set of custom wheels on it, but I don't know if I'll even do that. I'm gonna have to, a couple more things I told you before that I got to do to it, and I'll do that one of these days. But I think for right now, I probably rambled on long enough on this one, so I'm gonna spin you around. Flapjack's gonna tell you hi, and I'll tell you there he is down there. Here, come here, look at the camera. Say hi to the people. Can you say hi to the people? Can you say hello to everybody? You got a fan club out there. So everybody love each other, take care of each other. I'm back over by the swimming pool again. And it's just a quiet place. There's nobody around here right now. So I'll tell you, I'll be back again with another one real soon. I've got another subject I want to shoot here in a little bit. Maybe I'll try to get it done today. I got clouds, so the light is good. And so right now I'll just tell you, until I see you again, peace out.